Hello, fam. This is PJ, the author, aka the African King, aka the Ghetto Superstar. Welcome to the Weekend series. And the topic for today is to obey is better than to sacrifice. I'm going to be sharing three facts with you. So, the first point is about Joseph, who is Jesus' father. I feel like Mary was chosen because of Joseph. Joseph was very obedient, unlike Zechariah, John's father. When you go into the biblical story, when Joseph found out that like Mary had conceived before they got married, he made a mental note that he wasn't going to disgrace her. He was going to keep it on the low. And such a man is very rare to find. Imagine you pay the bride price of your woman, you're about to marry her, and then you realize she's pregnant. What are you going to do? And back in their time, all Joseph had to do was just oust Mary and say Mary is pregnant. And then people would have stoned Mary to death. But he didn't resort to that. He made a mental note that like he was going to like keep it on the low, keep it hush hush. So then you realize Joseph was one in a million. And you realize his obedience also goes very far that when the angel of God told Joseph that like they are going to kill Jesus, he didn't wait for morning or day to break. He took Jesus and Mary and bundled them off to Egypt because he didn't want anything to happen to them. I feel like because of his obedience, Mary was chosen because they knew that the man that was in her life is very obedient to God, and whatever that God tells that man to do, that man was going to do it. And you realize this obedience seeps into the Lord Jesus Christ, and Jesus Christ is able to fulfill his mission. When you go to Zechariah, John's father's side, when the angel of God came to tell Zechariah, your son is going to be this and that and that, Zechariah was a priest, but he doubted. And then the angel of God told Zechariah, your son's name is going to be John. But even with that one, he still doubted because what was the norm in those days was like his son was supposed to be named after him. So because of that, he was struck with muteness before the day that his son was born. When he said, "Oh, the name is going to be John," that's when the muteness went away. But you look at his father's life because of the doubt and all those stuffs around his life. Imagine if Jesus was had been born to Zechariah and her wife. Jesus would have died because the man wasn't that obedient. And he was even a priest. And when you look at John's life, John died somehow a foolish death. Because I talked to my pastor and he was like, what John talked about that got him beheaded. He didn't even need to talk about those kind of things, and that cost him his life. So the second point that I want to talk about is I'm going to use Saul, the first king of Israel, as an example. And I'm going to use Ruth, who was the daughter-in-law of Naomi. When you look at Saul, after he was instated as the king, there was a time that they wanted to offer sacrifices to God, and then Samuel is the one who's supposed to do that. The king is not supposed to. But then there were men gathered and they were waiting for Samuel. Samuel was delaying. And then Saul saw that the men were leaving. And because the men were leaving, Saul took whatever it was and he offered a sacrifice. When immediately he finished, Samuel appeared and Samuel was like, you have done a foolish thing because you are not supposed to do this. And because of that, God is going to rip the throne from you and give it to another. When he was asked why he did it, he said, I saw that the men were leaving. But what I am thinking is Saul should have been more afraid of what God would think than what men would think. And then you see this same error when God asked Saul to destroy, I think, one of the towns that were fighting against Israel, either Moab or some other town. God told him to destroy everyone, destroy both livestock, destroy both humans, destroy everything. But when they went to destroy the place, they left the king alive and then they took part of the plunder and brought it back. And Samuel saw it again, was like, why have you done this? God told you to destroy everything. And then Saul was like, and the men wanted to take some of the things, so I was afraid of the men. So you realize Saul's whole life, he respects men more than he respects God. And this same attitude seeps into his daughter, the daughter that David married. After David had gotten the throne and he brought the Ark of the Covenant into Jerusalem, when he brought the Ark of the Covenant, he was dancing, he was wearing an ephod, and he was dancing and like he showed some of his nakedness. But it wasn't a big deal because he was dancing in front of God. But Micah, Saul's daughter, saw it from the tower and was and like developed contempt in her heart. So when David finished everything outside and went into his house, Micah came out and was like, great king of Israel, look at the way you've gone to disgrace yourself in front of the whole assembly. And David was like, I was dancing before God, so even if I naked myself, I don't care, I'll do it 100 more times. And you realize Micah, Saul's daughter, was also what fond of pleasing men more than pleasing God. And because of that, her womb got shut till the day she died. And now we go over to Ruth. Ruth was Naomi's daughter-in-law. When you go into the Bible and you read about Ruth's life story, you realize Ruth was also very obedient. After she came back with Naomi from their city, because there was famine in Israel, and Naomi escaped with her husband and two sons into another territory, and then Unfortunately, her husband died and her two sons also died. But her two sons married two women, and Ruth was part of them. But Ruth said she would not stay with her people. She wanted to stay with Naomi. So when the famine got less severe, Naomi came back to Israel and Ruth followed her. When Ruth followed her back, Naomi advised Ruth to go and lay beneath the bedpost of the man that Ruth was working in her field. The man's name was Boaz, and he was old. If Ruth was like these our girls of today, like our Gen Z girls, they would have been like, why would you advise me, a young woman with firm breasts, with big butt, to go and try to sleep with Boaz or something? Would rather prefer a younger man, a man with pink lips or something. But Ruth did not say that. He did not say, oh, Boaz is old. What Naomi told her, that's exactly what she did. And because of her obedience, Ruth and Boaz fathered Jesse's father. And Jesse is the father of David. Because of her obedience, she has been recognized in history. And I don't think there could have been any other instance where she would have gained such an honor just by being obedient. And then the last point that I want to discuss is not like what I've previously discussed. It's a little different, but it's still on the same topic of obedience. I want to talk about Nebuchadnezzar. Nebuchadnezzar wasn't a man of God, but his kingship had been authorized in heaven. And someone will be like, how is it that someone that does not serve God, how is his kingship authorized in heaven? When you go into the Bible, the day that his divine authority was revoked, it was an angel that came from heaven that revoked his divine authority. So it means even both believers and unbelievers, we are all dancing in the palms of God. The reason why I'm making this statement is because for Christians that are seeking truth, sometimes when you seek truth and you go and read other stuff apart from the Bible. Even when you take the Bible and you read it with intellectual knowledge, you start doubting the Bible. When you read the Bible with a historian mind, you doubt the Bible. And with all these doubts, you start wondering if what you are really worshiping is true or not. But then the Bible is not a history book, and it's not a storybook, and it's not an intellectual book. The Bible is a spiritual book, and it's meant for your spiritual growth. When you take on the Bible like that, you realize, okay, the Bible is perfect in its own way. And I want to talk about like Christians that are seeking truth of every or seekers of truth, not just Christians, anyone that is seeking truth. Sometimes you go reading some other texts because there are so many religious texts, spiritual texts flowing around. And what actually made me doubt before was that like I read so many stuff and I realized there was an old religion that was in existence before the new religion, which was Christianity, came. And the argument that the people in the old religion made was like, in our old religion, we worship a three-in-one God. And then all of a sudden, Christianity comes about, and Christianity tells us that they are right, we are wrong. But then what do we see? We see that Christians also worship a God that is three-in-one. So the most old religion, those people who were serving the old religion are like, then Christianity is just copying us or imitating us, or Christianity just used our knowledge as foundation and built on it. There are times that people have accused the Bible of containing texts that came out of um, an Egyptian book or something. So with all these things going about, I kept asking the Holy Spirit for direction, like why all these things? I want to understand why it is like that. And then the understanding that I got was that like the fallen angels that fell down with Lucifer in the beginning, most of them rebranded themselves as gods and sold themselves to certain peoples as gods. So those people revered them as gods. And the knowledge that they brought to the people, it was knowledge that they brought from heaven. And then they spread to the people. So it was somehow the same knowledge that the prophets also came to talk about. But then the only difference here is that the fallen angels were not authorized by heaven to distribute such knowledge. But then the prophets of God are authorized by heaven. So let's just make an example. Let's say the first ever university that is built in the country. They employ 10 lecturers to teach them knowledge from the university to go and distribute into the world. After they teach the 10 lecturers the knowledge, 5 of them get into a quarrel with the authorities of the university, and then they leave. When they leave and they go into the world, they go and teach the world the knowledge that they learned from the university. But when they go and teach it, they don't teach it as the knowledge belongs to the university. They go out there and teach it as knowledge that they themselves have, and then they place themselves as gods before the people, and deceive the people. So now, after so many years, the university realizes now these people are doing damage. So the university now sends their own people into the world. What knowledge do you think they are also going to share to the world? The knowledge that they are going to share is going to be similar to the old one, but these people have been authorized by the university to go and distribute this knowledge. So the only source that you should be taking your knowledge from is to be from those that have been authorized from source, not those that have been authorized from source. And those that haven't been authorized from source, unfortunately, they came before those that were authorized. So some people might feel like, oh, because these people came first, it means yes, it's true. But it's not about who came first. It's about the source from where you are getting your knowledge from. So with that, I come to an end of my submission. This is the weekend series, and the topic that we just discussed is to obey is better than to sacrifice. And to the millions of PJ the author fans, to the billions of weekends fans all across the globe, I just want you all to know I just dropped my latest album, and it's titled Slam Boys Testimony, and it's out on all streaming platforms. I want you all to stream it. I want you all to sleep with it. I want you all to eat with it. I want you all to fuck with it. I want you all to meditate with it. And I want you all to dance and sing to it. And this has been brought to you by PJ the author, aka the African King, aka the Ghetto Superstar. Weekends.